Hey everybody, this is Brandon, the cleaning operator again. I'm really bad at making short videos, so today's going to be my attempt to do that. And today I'm going to talk about how I started off charging $40 an hour, and I've grown my business now to making around $400,000 a year, and kind of how I grew my pricing from that starting point. So my first year, I actually grossed $159,000. I personally was working around 30 to 35 hours a week, and I was cleaning houses myself. That first year, I paid myself about $48,000. It's okay, but that is not a success story. It's a warning because there's actually a lot of people in the cleaning industry doing kind of what I was doing. $48,000 in a year sounds okay until, again, you realize that I was running an entire business. I was trying to clean. I was managing employees and schedules. I was selling services to customers and doing sales, on the phone all the time. I was running the entire operation. I'm getting chemicals and equipment. I'm organizing things. On the other hand, my first cleaner that I hired was actually a friend of mine. I brought them on so they could teach me how to clean professionally because I had never done this before in the industry. And I was paying them $20 an hour just to show up and clean. And when you do the math, me working 30 to 35 hours a week, specifically doing all of the things, I was getting paid roughly $27 an hour to run an entire business. And I'm still doing a lot of the cleaning. So I was underpriced. I did not fully understand what it took to run a business and make it work. From the outside looking in, it looked like it was working, right? $159,000 your first year sounds great. But when you realize how much money you're actually making and your profit from it, you see the mistakes. So this video is to see about those pricing mistakes that I made early, how I found them, and now the systems that I use in order to turn that same business, reliable housekeeping, into a $400,000 a year business without me even cleaning anymore. I only show up to houses when I want to, and that's usually to check in on my staff. So, why it matters. Let's get into that. So here's what underpricing actually looks like in practice, right? I was charging $40 an hour. A standard 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home, say 1,500 square feet, I would say takes us about 3 hours on the dot to clean. Back then, I would be charging $40 an hour. That's how I started. So that means that job I'd be charging $120 for a 3-bed, 2-bath, 1,500 square foot home. And this would be for like a biweekly service. Today, my hourly rate, my target hourly rate, is around $68 an hour. It could even be a little higher, but I like staying competitive. And the reality is I have great profit margins, so I can afford to not bump it up to $75 an hour, like some companies do in my area. With that being said, at $68 an hour, that job still is supposed to take roughly, 3 hours. That means that I'm billing that same job at $204 today versus $120 before, right? So that same house, same 3-hour job, but now it's an $84 difference per job, meaning I'm making $84 more than I was previously. Now, if you're doing 15 jobs a week at $40 an hour instead of a target hourly rate of, say, $68 an hour, that's $1,260 a week that doesn't ever make it into your pocket. And if you do that for a year, that's $65,000 in a year that is gone. Not because you're doing anything wrong operationally, but because the numbers that you started with were never right in the first place. So the painful part is, well, when you're in the middle of it all, right? The business feels like it's working, clients are calling, the schedule is filling up, you're tired, and you're busy, and you're working, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're profitable. And ask me how I know, it's because I lived it. So, how do you actually build the right number? Most operators that I know are going to do it one of two ways. The first way is they're going to look at what a competitor charges, pick something close, and just go with it. The problem is not hourly pricing necessarily as a model. It's that you're inheriting somebody else's best guess. You don't know if they did the math and the homework to get there, and you don't even know if their math or homework is going to really match your business. So you don't know if it's going to be a good pick. The second way, which is what I would recommend, the one that works, is to build your target hourly rate from the inside out. Start with finding out what the service actually cost you, and then price on top of that with a real margin. So 3 main inputs that I would say are going to help you figure out what your target hourly rate should be. Your labor cost per hour. Find out what that is. If you're paying employees, find out what your labor cost per hour is. And I would include not just the employee's hourly rate, I would include things like workers' comp. I would include things like, general liability, even the taxes that you have to pay on those employees. Find out that actual labor cost per hour. For example, I pay my employees an average of $25 an hour. And after I fully load everything else into that hourly rate, taxes and whatnot, I'm usually paying around $31 an hour for my labor cost. So you need to find that out, right? Do a little bit of math, take some time, look through your data, figure that out. Again, most operators, I would say what's going to happen is you're going to end up paying 20 to 25% above whatever your actual hourly rate is. So if your hourly rate's $25, 31 is pretty realistic. So again, that's what I'm looking at. Also, number 2, find out what your monthly overhead is. This is the other big input you need. What are you paying for insurance and supplies? What are you paying for gas? What are you paying for your software, for your phone? What are you paying for your marketing, right? Add up all of those numbers and find out what it is averaging over a 6-month period if you can. If you don't have that information, at least find out what it is month to month and add it up. Figure out what your numbers are, and then from there, you'll know, okay, hey, I'm spending $2,000 a month on X, Y, and Z, so I need to make sure I can pay for that. And then number 3, biggest input that you need to know is, what are you going to pay yourself? Not what does it feel modest, like, oh, I should only make a little bit, but, I only want to make $5 an hour for each person that's cleaning for me. No, like, what do you actually want to make? If you're building a business and you're doing a lot of work and you also want it to grow, what are you going to pay yourself, right? You're the person that's responsible for everything, for all the systems, the standard operating procedures. You're responsible for making sure customers are happy, good reviews. You're responsible for it all. So pay yourself what you're worth and know your worth, right? Something I learned from my mom, it's quite funny. She would always ask at the end of a job, if somebody were to clean her house or do some sort of service, she'd say, okay, do you think you did a good job? And, sometimes they'd say yes, and sometimes they would, I hope so, and she'd say, okay, well, I'd like to give you a tip. How much of a tip do you think I should give you? And almost always, they say, I don't know, $10, $20. And she would say, okay, I'll give you a $20 tip, or I'll give you a $10 tip, but I wish you would have said more, because I really think you're worth a lot more and your value's a lot higher. But you said 20, so I'll give you 20. And it was her way of teaching them a lesson that, hey, you're actually worth a lot more than what you think. And I would say the same applies in this industry. If you're the business owner, you're doing a lot of hard work. You're probably doing the cleaning early on. And even if you're not doing the cleaning, you still have a lot to organize. Pay yourself what you think you're worth. You're worth a lot more than what you think. That's all I'm going to say. There's a reason why my business, I'm making $400,000 a year with the business, but I end up making around $150,000 to $180,000 depending on the exact numbers. The reality is I deserve to get paid a lot. I've put my blood, sweat, and tears into this for over 5 years, and I've earned it. And the reality is that the only reason why my business is even performing as where it is because I continue to put effort into it and look at the data and make good decisions. You should do the same. So this is the third input, like I said, is what you want to pay yourself. And this number oftentimes gets left out because people undervalue themselves. So please, please, please do not do that. So really quickly, I'll show you what the math looks like in reality, right? My target hourly rate today is $68 an hour. The standard 3-bed, 2-bath biweekly job takes me 3 hours. That means I'm charging $204. Now, how did I get to $68 an hour? I work backwards from what the business needs to generate, right? My labor is $25 an hour. After overhead, it's around $31, maybe $32 an hour. I layer that across all the jobs, right? From there, I also know what my expenses are. I know my expenses probably around $3,000 to $4,000 a month. If I average it all out, it can change. My biggest factor for me when it comes to expenses is actually my marketing budget. If I decide to spend $3,000 in a month on marketing, my expenses are probably going to be more around $5,000 or $6,000. So, but marketing is a switch I can turn on and off. All my other expenses are quite cheap. So, at least in comparison to how much money we're making percentage wise. So again, from there, you're going to find out, you know your labor costs, you know your supply overhead, and you think, okay, if I'm charging $204 for a 3-hour job, at the end of the day, my margin's close to 40%. What am I making, right? And that's how you can find out what you're going to be paying yourself, right? That's how it's going to ultimately work out. And if you don't do the math in this way, what's going to happen is your jobs aren't going to scale, your profit margin's not going to scale, and you're not going to know exactly how you should be pricing jobs, and you're going to be working yourself hard, you're going to be getting underpaid, and you're going to burn out. How many people burn out in this industry? So what you need to do is treat this as an actual calculation, something that you can do with some math instead of guessing and hoping that you're close. So here's what you should do this week. Pull four numbers, right? Find out your real labor costs per hour, including your taxes. If you don't know the exact figure, just take $25 an hour or whatever your hourly rate is. Maybe it's $15 an hour, $20 an hour, and add 22% to whatever your pay rate is. Just do that as a quick estimate. It'll get you close. That's your first number. Number two, second thing you need to do is calculate your total monthly overhead. This is something that you need to know every single month. What is your monthly overhead? Number three, find out what you want to pay yourself. An actual number, not what you've been paying yourself, but what you believe you deserve. This is something you need to write down. Number four, find out your realistic billable labor hours per month. In other words, if you have 15 jobs a week that you do and your average job is 3 hours, that's 45 hours a week. Multiply that by 4 weeks. Boom, you've got your billable hours per month. Figure out those numbers, because that number is going to help you determine what you should be charging per hour. So you're then going to add up number 2 and number 3, right? You're going to add your total monthly labor cost, divide the whole thing by number 4, your billable hours, and then that's going to be your floor. That's the minimum revenue per labor hour that your business needs in order to actually work. And compare that to what you're actually charging. If there's a gap, it doesn't mean that your business is broken. It just means that you priced from the wrong starting point. And the fix is going to be to raise your rates. I did it 4 times whenever I first started. I started out at $40 an hour, then I went to $50 an hour, to $55, to then $60, and then eventually I ended up coming up with a flat rate system where my target hourly rate was $65 an hour, and now we're at $68 an hour. So every step that I took in raising my prices felt risky. I ended up losing some customers along the way. That just happens. But you end up getting new customers that are going to end up paying that more of a premium price. And every step I made in figuring this out and systematizing it more made my business healthier. So the clients I lost in each increase were almost always not worth keeping in the first place. Don't be afraid to raise your prices if it's what you need to do to be profitable. So here's what this is really about. It's really about telling you that your gut feelings don't scale, right? You cannot train your instincts into another manager or into a business and have it work unless there's a system, a documentation, something that turns it into more than just instinct and feeling and your gut, right? You have to have some math behind it. You have to be able to actually time your jobs. You need to be able to know what you're doing and to make sense of it. Otherwise, it's not a business, it's just experience and feeling. So again, I went from $40 an hour to now $68 an hour, and my profit margin my first year, I think, was probably like 12 to 15% in all reality. I was working hard and making $27 an hour, and now I'm making probably around $160,000 a year, realistically, and doing also while now my job is making videos and helping you guys and do other things like that. So it's drastically changed over a 5-year period, and you absolutely can do the same. But start by finding out what you actually should be pricing and what it looks like. Also, the pricing wasn't the only thing that changed in my business, but it is a foundation, and you cannot build a business without having a foundation of knowing what you should be charging. You cannot build profit margins into a business that's already underpriced. So you need to fix this number first. With that being said, if you guys need help with calculations and figuring out what you should be charging, maybe even figuring out what your target hourly rate should be, I built an app that specifically helps with this. It's called Clean Quote. Clean Quote has an onboarding wizard that'll help you find your target hourly rate based on all the information we discussed in this video. And then not only that, but it has a really cool calculator tool, which will tell you based on the home's square footage, based on the soil level, as well as varying other factors like whether there's pets, number of bedrooms and bathrooms. It'll give you pricing for recurring jobs, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, deep clean, move in, move out, you name it. It'll give you pricing. It'll tell you approximately how long the job should take. And it'll really help you to start setting standards for your business. So check out Clean Quote if you're interested. There is a 2-week free trial, and then it's like $29 a month after that. And it's something I'm still actively building and making better and better over time. So check it out if you're interested, even if it's just to use the free trial and figure out what your target hourly rate is. It's like one of the first things you'll do in the app. So with that being said, again, find out those 4 numbers. Find out what you should be charging for your target hourly rate. Do that this week. It will help your business hugely to grow more and more so you have a profit margin that is defensible. Anyway, this is Brandon with with the cleaning operator, and I hope your profit margins grow this week. And I hope that you guys grow as a business. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.